talk about Ahsoka because I do have some thoughts about this week's episode. Again, I liked last week's. I just can't stress it enough. I did really like last week's episode. But when I was watching this episode, I know what was missing for me, and it was motherfucking Baylan.
Yep.
Baylan? Okay, I know everyone's like, oh, Thrawn, and Thrawn's cool, and I like him. Like, perfect bad guy already off the bat. However, Baylan, coming off of an episode that did feature Anakin / Darth Vader, and kind of was much more about Ahsoka and her issues than Anakin. But for whatever reason, while I was listening to a lot of Baylan's dialogue, because he, like Anakin, is a fallen Jedi.
Yeah.
He's a Jedi turned Sith in all of this madness.
Well, he's not a Sith.
Well, yeah, okay. He's not a Sith, but he's also not like green lightsaber or whatever. Right. But anyway, he's not a part of the Order. That is for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. He but anyway, what I was getting at is I found it interesting to hear about, like, when Shiv asked, what do you miss about it? And then you hear him talk about the idea of it, like what the hope was. I'm pretty sure that's what he said.
Yeah.
And then you also hear about how when everything was burned to the ground and it was all taken from him, he didn't understand why. And then and in a way, he's like a semi-historian who's like, I looked back and I realized, like, this was always going to happen. It's happened before. Like, I love the line about it's just is a circle. It's a cycle that I want to break. Which, shout out to Game of Thrones, because for anybody who's watching Ahsoka and who has watched the first series of Game of Thrones, please tell me I'm not the only one who immediately thought of when Daenerys was talking to Tyrion about breaking the wheel. It's the same thing. It's a cycle. There's these families, Targaryen. I don't know my Game of Thrones very well, but I'm telling you, it's a very similar thing where all of these families are just switching out who gets to sit on that throne. Here, we only have two. We have the Jedi and we have the Sith. But still, it's like this constant. I was like, oh my God, that is such a cool parallel. So I really like Baylan, and there. I don't know about you, but he gives me such King Arthur vibes.
Oh yeah,
like someone who would sit at the round table. It's so Shakespearean with him. It's really cool.
It really is cool, and you're right. I mean, Baylan. We've talked about, rest in peace, Ray Stevenson being MVP of this series, but he really is. I mean, and you're right. I mean, that presence, that gravitas. I mean, it is that Arthurian gravitas that he just brings to the role, and the dialogue, as you noted, and the parallels, and and even though at the beginning of the episode, it was a nice. We only had Ahsoka for really the first few minutes, but her and who I'm talking about, the stories, and then later it really sets it up well when Baylan comes back and talks about being there in the temple and talking to Shin about the fables and the storytelling, as far as hearing about Peridia and all these things at the time we thought they were just myth and folklore. And now here he is, and he feels something about that place calling him to break that cycle that you talked about, where he is, Morgan has her game, Thrawn has his thing, Baylan has his agenda, and his
Right.
agenda, and his agenda is breaking that cycle. And whatever is on Peridia, he feels that, at first I thought maybe it was the world between worlds that he was that he was trying to access, but more I think about it, to your point about bringing Anakin into this,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and thinking about Anakin being the chosen one,
Right.
and but then when you think about in all the lore that they've been bringing up from Clone Wars with the Mortis family and the three
Right.
sisters and the Force and all those kind of things. So the Mortis are like the balance, the father, son, and daughter, the light, the dark, in the middle that brings everything together. And I think that's the beginning thing that he's trying to find, to like break the cycle once and for all, to bring that balance to end this constant warring cycle between the Jedi and the Sith. And so
So you
I,
think Mortis is on Peridia?
something, yeah. I mean, yeah, because the three sister, the night sisters of Dathomir, the grand sisters there on Peridia,
Right.
they all tie back to that galaxy. And so in that galaxy, of course, they tap the Force through magic with the K, and so whereas and so there is that source power that he's just trying to get to, that for once and for all he will be able to end all this nonsense, because he was there at Order 66. And so we had, and that was that, and see, and clearly he knows what Anakin did. And
Well, but he also I took from his speech,
mhm,
he knows that the rebels are just foolish. They won, but
mhm,
they're not governing correctly.
right,
They're gonna let what happened. It's because the genius of having Andor shown last year so quickly before this,
mhm,
where what I took away from that speech was like, yeah, they're in power now. They won,
yeah,
but just winning doesn't mean you get to hold on to that power forever,
right,
because your adversary is just regrouping, just like what you did when you weren't in control. And
exactly,
so when he says like their weakness, I was like, okay, yep,
yep,
they're a bit too weak to fully lead, and that's why the cycle is just going to repeat. But I mean, to go back to your point about what he's looking for, I think that's why I'm drawn to his storyline, is because Filoni and team have done a really good job with this character of giving him more mystery.
mhm,
Not to say that everyone else is pretty cut and dry. However, we talk about it all the time, like how the parallels between the shows and how there is this habit of repeating some beats with these
yep,
characters. But with him, he's like he's very different,
yeah,
and I do like the fact that yeah, he does know what Anakin did, but he almost gives what I think a lot of viewers, whether a common viewer or someone deep in the lore, is really wanting to understand is more about that mentality change with
mhm,
Anakin, about
yeah,
what his thinking is.
yeah.
Because you just don't go overnight from bad to good, and yeah, we won't talk about the prequels.
We can talk about. We won't talk about the sequels. How about that?
Yeah,
Yeah. No, but I
yeah.
think, yeah, but but also to that knowing what happened, and knowing, again, to your, I'm glad we started with Baylan, because when he talks about the ideal of the Jedi, and the cycles, and really getting into the whenever he finds the Boken, he identifies the Boken Jedi, and he talks about, gets into and wanted to train Shin to be something more
Yeah.
than, and it really gets, again, it goes back to ties back to his motivation of, yeah, Thrawn has it. Morgan has and Thrawn have their little thing going here. Everybody else got their own little agendas. But whatever source that he is trying to find to end this cycle of Jedi, Sith, Rebels, Empire, generational conflict, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
He's training her to like be better, because up to this point, to aspire what the Jedi really were supposed to be, and thinking back, and it really goes back to like when with Obi-Wan said, they were, at least the idea of the Jedi was to be the peacekeepers and to keep things proper in the universe, and to keep balance in the Force, and be guardians. But because of I guess the Temple Jedi, for lack of a better term, lost their way, and instead of relying on the Force, they relied on the government, and of course we all know what happened there with Palpatine using them. And then
Right.
you have these spoken Jedi who, the ones in the wild, like, Luke, Bray, Ezra. So you got this. So I mean, he so he's looking at them like, well, they ain't for, I don't know if it's like a purity test or maybe not that, but they're not Temple Jedi. They're just these people who just kind of, they know how to, they learn a few little parlor tricks and can wield the Force, but they're not like what I'm making you to be, Shen, which is something more that can like help me execute whatever his master plan is that will,
I don't think he has a master plan.
Yeah.
I don't think he's necessarily a villain. I think in a way, while you were talking, I was thinking about this because I was like, because your ideas gave me some more to think about. But I think that he's just has, I don't think he has a master agenda, but he doesn't want to follow others' agenda.
Yeah.
Whether it's like with Thrawn, he doesn't want to like just follow Thrawn on what Thrawn wants to do, and he doesn't want to follow Luke on what Luke wants to do and what Luke is saying the Jedi way is. No, he's like, I feel like he's almost looking for more freedom, like just more of the dark side has its virtues and the good side has its virtues, and there and in between is really where everyone should be, because so but it is interesting how at the beginning when they land, the witches sense Sabine right away as being a Jedi, right?
Yeah, so
I was just going to say, but none of them say anything about Baylan. And what I found to be interesting is Thrawn's reaction to learning that Baylan was once a Jedi.
Yeah, well, it's very clear that Thrawn was around back to the Clone War days.
Right,
right. So he knew
Baylan. Like,
Baylan.
I understand. Yeah, I know why he had that reaction. Yeah. I found it to be a good choice for the witches, who are not necessarily going off of their history with the people, but more about like the magical sense of, oh, I sense the Force in you or whatever. And sniffing that out very heavily in Sabine, but not with Baylan, which kind of puts him in this place where whatever was once a part of him that made him a Jedi, it's clearly not there, or else the magic would have spotted it.
It would have, yeah. That was a very smart story choice. I think that was definitely showing, and as well as telling, in a good way. And it was very interesting whenever they sensed the Jedi taint on Sabine, and as I was watching that, I was wondering, is it as much of a thing where is it Ahsoka's echoes around her, or she really is Force? She is Jedi sensitive, Force trained, and given that the witches are familiar with the passage, given that the wells, the Purgil, have like come back and forth, they're familiar with things in the other galaxy.
Mhm.
And so, but I'm glad. But with that being said, I'm glad, and again, a very smart way of with introducing Thrawn and its return, because when of course Sabine's put into another cell, and of course she tries to use the Force, and I love the way they like set that whole thing up, where after they do the head fake where they're like making, oh, you're a Jedi, and then and things start to move, and then we realize that it wasn't her, it was just the star, the Chimera, just the Star Destroyer coming in and all that. So I really liked that aspect of using that scene as a way to again do that head fake of like, oh, Sabine's finally going to be able to do it, but no, she can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that brings us to Thrawn.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Good old Thrawn.
Good old Grand Admiral Thrawn. Yeah, and as so I have to ask for someone who's heard about Thrawn, but either through Mandalorian but haven't watched Rebels or anything else. Did he live up to your expectations, or do you need to see more?
Oh, I need to see more.
Okay.
Not that expectations are a funny thing. I was not underwhelmed. Like I was not underwhelmed, but I wasn't surprised by anything that he did this episode. Okay. I guess maybe I was just a tiny bit underwhelmed, because I'm like, okay, you're clearly overcompensating for something. That's all I'm saying. A fucking huge ship and a lot of undead troopers, but manned at your will. But and all of his dialogue was great. The acting was great. But I had heard so much about him that when he was finally here, I didn't feel like I got punched in the face. Like, I didn't feel like, oh my God, best villain, because I haven't seen too much in action. Like, he's just a man who's like, okay, dude, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for doing what I said to do. We got to go, because I'm done. I'm done here. I got my plan. I got my troops. And then he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you mean you brought Ahsoka here unknowingly? Fuck you. Now we got to do this. So, like, and there were hints and dialogue choices that I picked up on where, like, he's clearly a bad guy. But he also, it wasn't a surprise. Like, I'd heard so much about him. I was kind of expecting all of this from him. So, yeah, it's just, neither Thrawn nor Ezra punched me in the face or was like, wow, great. And I know we're going to talk about Ezra, because I will say right now, Thrawn's whole entrance, significantly more on board with it than Ezra, because I have questions, and this also partly stems to my continued disdain for Sabine. I have major issues with Sabine.
Fair enough.
But yeah, Thrawn did give me like one of my favorite characters this episode, Tato. Tato was
the Howler?
Freaking scene stealer.
No, the Howler was a stealer.
Yeah. Okay. He made the Howler made 25% of Sabine's scenes work.
They really did. You're no lie. No lies have been told.
No lies. And I mean, and then on top of that, they brought in not turtle people somebody please tell me, after watching this episode, you have now begun to write fan fiction of where Grogu and the non-turtle rock people become friends and family.
Yeah.
Come on.
the show writes itself. I mean, Anati and Grogu, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's your next story in the New Republic time frame, Filoni.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But enough about the cute little creatures.
Yeah.
What about you, Will? I mean, you've been you were one episode off, but did they deliver? What are your thoughts about how they were like, here's
I thought,
Thrawn,
yeah,
here we go.
I thought they delivered for
Yeah.
me as a Rebels fan, and seeing the tactician to the quintessential scene for me with Thrawn was after he learned about Ahsoka.
Yep.
And where he turned to Morgan and said, "I need to know who was she trained by?" You know, just going down all the things, because that is quintessential Rebels Thrawn, where he sizes up an opponent and really, because he's not gonna like throw hands and like beat you physically, even though in Rebels they used to show him fighting with combat droids and stuff. So he can hold his own, because the Chiss, which is his race, they are warriors.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the tactical mind that really, I thought they really captured well. Obviously, the physical aspect with the voice. I mean, having Lars portray him in live action after doing the voice work in Rebels, that was so clear. The devotion that his both probably dead and undead the zombie night troopers. I mean, some of them probably did survive the voyage between the galaxies. I guess that would have been 10 years ago at this point in the timeline, Star Wars timeline. That was the one thing if I did have a quibble about the introduction, where I think they did not do. I'm not saying it was a little detraction. I wish they had just had a little bit of dialogue just to like show how Thrawn kept all this together.
Yes.
Over the years.
Yeah. It's something where you're just like, for the past few episodes, we got to get to this place to get this guy. They get to the place, immediately he gets called upon. He's here, and he's like, okay, let's go. And it's kind of like, well, how are you alive? Like, what's going on with these troopers? You got a new lieutenant person with a gold-plated mask, Enoch. You got all this stuff. And it's so casual, but I do agree with you. Like, I did find it a very good choice where Thrawn's throughout 75% of this episode. And yet, I don't feel like I got a real good glimpse of Thrawn until he finds out Ahsoka's coming.
Yeah.
Like, it's until that moment where I almost want to say there's a change in even his eyes.
Yeah.
Where suddenly it's like, for up until now, I am someone who's clearly being rescued and like brought back, and I just want to get out of here. And now I hear that, and I'm assuming an old enemy is coming, and I know this enemy. I'm familiar. So I have to deal with this now while I can. Yeah. Like, that tactical mindset started to play in, and I was like, okay, now we're getting somewhere with Thrawn.
And the second, definitely that one, and also just how he handles Sabine was also that was another Thrawn move. That, as far as one, okay, she's the wild card. Two, okay, yeah, we're not going to kill you. We're going to honor Baylan's word. We're going to let you go find your friend.
Saw that coming.
Yeah, and exactly, and that's why the Morgan thing stood out more.
Right.
Then, I mean, the other one was also good and consistent, but it was a very like, okay, yeah, we know this is going to happen. We know where this is going to go, and then and then sending Baylan and Shin after them, and basically being cold Thrawn, like if the four of them get left behind, screw it, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
The bigger
I
picture,
did
yeah,
like
bigger,
that part. I
yeah,
did find that to be a very Thrawn like move of
yeah,
saying like, and then after them. But I like that because again, it goes back to Baylan.
yeah, yeah. That's yeah.
But
Goes back to Baylan,
but
but
it's so similar
yeah,
between like my feelings about Ezra because
mhm,
again, we get introduced to him. Granted, he's not in 75% of the episode, only like maybe 10 minutes. But
yeah,
still, and I go back and forth on this, Will, and then
mhm,
I know we're gonna get your thoughts on it, but
yeah,
I get back and forth on this idea that, hey, Sabine, thank you for
mhm,
finding me.
mhm,
No, I'm not. I'm gonna make sure we won and it worked. But I don't think he really asked her, how did you get here? Or did he? Did he ask her,
he
how did
did.
you get here? Okay. And
Well,
then
he
she
did,
just
and not as many. Yeah, not yeah. He was like, yeah, we did it, and then she's like, well, let's table that for now.
we did it as in we got here.
Well, they found him, and he wanted more details, but she didn't want to get into the details because
Mm.
then,
How did you find me? Got it. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah. I get it. It's at the end of the episode. You just want to reunite them and kind of dramatically pause on this realization that Sabine has where, oh, I didn't really think this through. Well, no shit. Um,
yeah,
because, yeah, you find him, but Sabine, now you have to get off the planet. You
yeah,
have to get out of here.
yeah,
like it's not, you got a one-way ticket.
hmm,
But thankfully, Ahsoka was eaten by a whale.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
I did see your tweet last night about you having some debate of your own,
yeah,
a more of a family debate about Ezra. But well, why
yeah,
don't you give us your thoughts, Will?
yeah. So so the actor he nails Ezra. I have to say. Let me just start with that.
Hmm.
As far as the spirit of Ezra Bridger, he Iman, like he from the mannerisms, the voice, he nails them. Where I had problems with that, and where the scene worked for me was this was exactly where we would find Ezra with the Nati. I mean, that was something that I could totally bought, totally got. It was fine. Where the scene didn't work for me at first was, and I don't this seems to be a directing choice. I think was it worked. The first part of the scene worked when he's like, I knew you would find me. That no issues there. It was just after that the pause, and maybe they shot it different ways, and maybe this was where they landed. Maybe they shot it where they did have the embrace sooner, the more emotional scene versus what we got, which seemed to kind of pause. Like, I don't know if it was a thing where Sabine was like just so overwhelmed that she just, holy fuck
Mm,
it. Maybe
I know what you're
that was the point. And now that I think about it, she's like, holy fuck, we actually did this. Where I did,
talking.
we made it work. And maybe that was why they held off on the emotional part of them with the embrace and stuff, just to sort of hold on Sabine to be like, we really did this.
Yeah, I
But it
know
still felt
exactly.
awkward.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but it
Yeah,
just makes me go back to a few episodes ago where we had this discussion about her decision to give Baylan
right.
the map,
Yeah.
and and everyone being like, "Oh my God!" Like it, and I told you about this argument that I heard that like if she didn't do that, she would have died.
Yeah.
So in a way, it was a survival move, if
Hmm.
you can view it. It didn't play that way, and it's very similar here, where on one hand, like watching it without thinking about it, but just watching it, you're like, yeah, that's him. So you're just gonna stand there,
Mhm.
like you just saw Thrawn and
Yeah.
everything that he's getting going.
Yeah.
FYI, you have no ship off this planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and you did it all to just stare at Ezra.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, hmm?
Yeah.
So I like, even as someone who doesn't know their history, I was like, where's the kiss? Like, where's
Yeah.
the come
Where's the
on
emotion?
here?
Yeah. You
Like, what the
gave up the
fuck?
galaxy.
You thought this man had died and you gave
Yeah.
up the galaxy to just stare at him and to
Yeah.
like high five? I
Yeah.
don't know. But and so a part of me is I'm sure it's just a writing thing or just directing slash writing because if they were supposed to kiss, that wouldn't have been an acting choice. That would
No.
have been like written in the script.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to just blame the director on this. I think it's also a writing choice.
Yeah.
But I know exactly what you're talking about, and I've heard similar things where, yeah, you can rationalize it after the fact and say she's just it's she's literally she thought Ezra was dead.
Hmm.
And so the fact that now she's seen him, he's talking to her, she's like frozen and just
Yeah.
stunned. Did it play that way upon first watch? No,
No,
it
it
didn't.
didn't.
It felt
It didn't.
way too awkward.
It did.
Um, so yeah, I don't know what it is. Sabine started off really strong in the series in the first two episodes, but there's something about the choices, whether it's directing, acting, well, maybe not acting, but directing and
Yeah.
writing wise, where they're making her such a, I'm gonna just say, a dumb character.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
They're
And it
making
just,
her into Star Lord. No, I
yeah.
love Star.
I love, yeah, no, you called it before Star Lord. That's a very Star Lord thing to do. But yeah, I mean, because the acting, I mean, I think she hits the spirit of Sabine very well. So I don't, it's definitely not an acting thing. I think she's doing a wonderful job as far as like the fierceness of Sabine and other things about the character. But yeah, that scene, it definitely, first impression, it did not leave. It did not give a good first impression. I did watch the episode again, and even on a second watch, actually, it reinforced to me like it did not work as far as what they were trying to achieve there. So
Yeah,
it, um, now the rest of the scene, yeah, it played normal. It played fine. I mean, they just should have just gone right to that yeah, upon, and it would have just been fine because everything else, like I said at the beginning, how he greeted her, where she found him with the Nati, all those things, everything, was that's totally Ezra, and
hmm
and and so everything was great about that scene except for just her initial reaction that I think that, as you said, you can rationalize it now where they were what they intended to do, but it just, as far as execution, it just did not execute it well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I felt like
Yeah.
there was something about the whole scene that felt awkward to me,
Mm.
where it was a good reunion, but I guess what I'm still missing from a lot of this
Mm.
is, as a casual viewer,
Mm.
I'm not getting emotionally punched.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what, yeah. And for me, as someone who did watch Rebels, it fell emotionally flat to me.
Yeah, yeah.
I
It
mean,
felt emotionally what to you?
flat.
Oh, wow. I was not expecting that.
It did. It was
Yeah,
flat. It was flat. I
yeah,
mean, once they finally did hug, but it was, yeah, it was just flat. I mean, I can't. I'm trying to rationalize it now, but I mean, it first impressions is everything, and it just did not land.
yeah. Especially when you sacrifice the
So
universe.
much,
But
and you start the episode with Ahsoka and Huang talking about the choices that were made. So you
yeah,
really need to like, if so you really need to like make it hit whenever they do get reunited. But I will say I'm glad they had all the reunifications all in this episode. They didn't drag it on.